Get on the ground, now! You're trespassing!
Officer, I'm standing still. Hands visible, no weapon, you have no cause.
I've got reports. Last warning, ground!
Trespassing requires no permission. I hold the deed, you're detaining me unlawfully.
Turn around, now!
Articulate your suspicion, this ends your career.
The shouting shattered the peaceful mid-morning atmosphere of the Oakwood Gardens apartment complex. Birds that had been chirping in the crepe myrtles scattered into the sky. But the man standing by the edge of the community pool didn't flinch. He didn't drop to his knees. He didn't raise his voice. He stood with the kind of stillness that isn't born of fear, but of absolute granite-hard discipline. "Officer." The man said, his voice a deep resonant baritone that carried easily across the water without shouting. "I am standing still. My hands are visible. I have no weapon. You are escalating a consensual encounter into a seizure without cause. You are trespassing on private property." Officer Kyle Braden screamed, his hand hovering over the grip of his service weapon, the retention strap already unsnapped. Braden was 29 years old with a high and tight haircut that hadn't grown out since the academy, and a posture that screamed he was looking for a fight. "I've had reports of a vagrant loitering in the pool area. Now get on the ground or I will put you on the ground." "I am not a vagrant," the man replied. He was Marcus Thorne, a 62-year-old black man dressed in a faded gray polo shirt and canvas work pants. His hair was salt and pepper cropped close to the scalp, and he stood with his spine perfectly straight. "And I am not trespassing. You are making a mistake that you will not be able to undo." "Don't you lecture me, old man. I'm giving you a lawful order." Braden took a step forward, his adrenaline spiking. He saw non-compliance. He saw a threat to his authority. What he didn't see was the history etched into the lines of Marcus Thorne's face. He didn't see the Silver Star recipient. He didn't see the retired Marine Corps colonel who had commanded battalions in Fallujah. And he certainly didn't know that the vagrant he was about to tackle had signed the closing papers on the Oakwood Gardens complex exactly 24 hours ago. Marcus Thorne wasn't just a resident, he was the owner. He owned the pool, the deck, the clubhouse, and every square inch of concrete Officer Braden was standing on. "I am asking you to lower your voice and articulate your reasonable suspicion," Marcus said, his eyes locking onto Braden's sunglasses. "You are currently detaining me. I want to know specifically what crime you suspect me of committing." "Trespassing, I just told you," Braden yelled, closing the distance to within 10 feet. "Now turn around." "Trespassing requires that I do not have permission to be here," Marcus stated calmly. "I do not need permission. I hold the deed." "Yeah, right. And I'm the King of England," Braden scoffed. "Last chance. Ground. Now." Before we watch this situation spiral into a life-altering legal nightmare for this officer, I need you to take a second. Stop what you're doing and leave a comment below telling me where you're watching from city-state country. We want to know who is standing with us. And if you believe that a badge is a responsibility, not a license to bully, hit that subscribe button right now. You do not want to miss how this veteran flips the script. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. This was a collision of two worlds. On one side, a young officer fueled by bias and a fragile ego convinced that a black man in work clothes didn't belong in a nice neighborhood on a Tuesday morning. On the other side, a man who had spent 30 years defending the Constitution that Braden was currently shredding. Marcus Thorne watched the officer's muscles tense. He calculated the distance. He knew that in about 5 seconds violence was coming. He didn't panic. He just prepared to document the end of Officer Kyle Braden's career. To understand how we reached this breaking point, we have to look at the 20 minutes prior. It was a beautiful Tuesday morning in late May. The sky was a piercing, cloudless blue, and the heat was just starting to rise off the pavement. Marcus Thorne had arrived at Oakwood Gardens at 0900 hours sharp. He had driven his 10-year-old Ford pickup truck, parked it in the maintenance bay, and grabbed his clipboard. Marcus wasn't the type of landlord who sat in an air-conditioned office collecting checks. He believed in leadership from the front. He had bought this complex because it was distressed the previous management had let it rot. The pool had been closed for 2 years due to pump failures, and Marcus had promised the tenants he would have it open by Memorial Day. That was his mission. He had spent the morning kneeling on the hot concrete, inspecting the filtration headers and checking the chemical balance of the water. He was sweating. His hands were covered in grease from the pump housing. To the casual observer, he looked like a janitor or a maintenance worker. To Marcus, there was no shame in honest labor. He was proud of the work. He was just making a note about the pH levels in his yellow legal pad when he heard the tires crunch on the gravel. He didn't look up immediately. He assumed it was a delivery truck, or perhaps a tenant heading to work late. Then came the door slam. Distinctive, aggressive. Marcus stood up and wiped his hands on a rag tucked into his belt. He turned to see a patrol cruiser parked diagonally across 2 handicap spots near the clubhouse entrance. Officer Kyle Braden was already out of the vehicle, adjusting his utility belt, scanning the area behind dark aviator sunglasses. Braden saw Marcus instantly. In Braden's mind, the equation was simple. Oakwood Gardens was a transitioning neighborhood, meaning it was trying to get better. He had been told by his sergeant to keep an eye on the amenities to prevent locals from neighboring lower-income areas from jumping the fences. When he saw a black man in dirty clothes standing by the pool holding a clipboard but wearing no uniform, his bias filled in the blanks. "Hey, you!" Braden shouted from 40 feet away. Marcus watched him approach. He didn't wave. He didn't smile. He just waited. "Can I help you, officer?" "You live here?" Braden asked, stopping at the edge of the pool gate. He didn't open it yet. He rested his hand on the latch. "I'm inspecting the facility," Marcus replied. It was the truth. It wasn't the whole truth, but he was under no obligation to provide his biography to a public servant who hadn't even introduced himself. "I didn't ask what you're doing. I asked if you live here," Braden snapped. "We've had reports of people hopping the fence to use the pool." "The pool is empty, officer." Marcus gestured to the water, which was clear but still treating. "And the gate was unlocked." "Let me see some ID," Braden demanded, pushing the gate open. The metal hinges whined in the silence. Marcus felt that familiar tightening in his chest, the frustration of a man who has followed the rules his entire life, only to be treated like a criminal because of his complexion. But he pushed the emotion down. Emotion was a liability in a tactical situation. "Officer," Marcus set his voice steady, "I am on private property. I am conducting lawful business. You have not observed me committing a crime. You have not articulated a reasonable suspicion that I am about to commit a crime. Therefore, under Brown versus Texas, I am not obligated to identify myself to you." Braden froze. He hadn't expected a citation. He expected fear. He expected compliance. He expected, "Yes, sir. Sorry, sir." The legal pushback felt like a slap in the face. "You want to play lawyer?" Braden sneered, stepping onto the pool deck. "Okay, I can articulate suspicion. You fit the description of a suspicious person reported in this area. Vagrant male, black loitering. That gives me the right to ID you, so hand it over or you're going for a ride." "There is no such report," Marcus said calmly. "I have been here for 2 hours. No one has walked by. You are fabricating a call to justify an unlawful fishing expedition." "You calling me a liar?" Braden's voice rose an octave. "I am calling you untrained," Marcus said. And that was the moment the conversation ended and the confrontation began. The air between them seemed to vibrate with heat and tension. Above them, on the second and third floor balconies of the apartment complex, sliding glass doors were opening. Residents were stepping out. A woman in 3B, Mrs. Gable, who had lived there for 20 years, leaned over her railing. She was a retired schoolteacher, white, in her late 60s. She squinted down at the pool. "Is there a problem, officer?" she called out. "Stay back, ma'am, police business," Braden yelled without looking up, his eyes fixed on Marcus. Marcus didn't look up either, but he noted the witness. Good. "Officer," Marcus said, keeping his hands open and away from his waist. "Let's reset. My name is Marcus. I am authorized to be here. If you want to verify that, you can call the property management number listed on the sign right behind you, but I am not giving you my driver's license because you have no legal basis to demand it." "I don't need to call anyone. I'm investigating a trespassing complaint." Braden lied. He was committed to the lie now. He couldn't back down in front of the lady on the balcony. And under state law, failure to identify during a lawful detention is a secondary offense, obstruction. "It is only obstruction if the detention is lawful," Marcus corrected him, channeling the tone he used to use when dressing down a junior lieutenant who had neglected to clean his weapon. "A detention requires reasonable articulable suspicion, RAS. Looking like a vagrant is not a specific articulable fact indicative of criminal activity. It is a bias, and the Fourth Amendment protects me from your bias." Braden's face flushed a deep, angry red. He was used to people who didn't know the law or people who knew it but were too scared to use it. He wasn't used to a man who stood like a statue and quoted Supreme Court logic. "I'm done arguing," Braden said, his voice dropping to a menacing growl. "You are being detained. Put your hands on your head." "Am I under arrest?" Marcus asked. "Or am I being detained?" "You're detained. Then I am not required to put my hands on my head. I am not a threat. I am standing still." "You are refusing a lawful order." "I am refusing an unlawful command designed to humiliate me," Marcus said. "There is a difference, one that your supervisor will explain to you later." Braden stepped into Marcus's personal space. He was close enough that Marcus could smell the stale coffee on his breath. Braden was trying to provoke a reaction. He wanted Marcus to push back, to flinch, to raise a hand. Any movement could be interpreted as assault on an officer or resisting. It was a trap Marcus had seen police set a dozen times in the news. Marcus went rigid. He focused on a point on the horizon. He regulated his breathing. In for 4 hold, for 4, out for 4. "You think you're smart, huh?" Braden whispered. "You think because you know some big words you can run this town, I run this beat. Not you. Now for the last time. ID. Now." "No," Marcus said. Simple. Final. Braden's hand twitched. He looked around. He saw Mrs. Gable on the balcony. He saw another man, a tenant named Mr. Henderson, stepping out onto his patio with a phone in his hand. The camera was pointed right at them. Braden felt the walls closing in. If he walked away now, he looked weak. He looked like he let a suspect talk him down. His ego, fragile and inflated by the badge, couldn't handle the retreat. He had to win. "That's it," Braden said, stepping back and unclipping his radio. "Dispatch show me 10 to 15 with one male subject at Oakwood Gardens. Non-compliant. Resisting." "I am not resisting," Marcus said clearly for the camera on the balcony. "I am asserting my rights." "Stop talking!" Braden screamed. "Turn around!" Marcus didn't move. He stood his ground not aggressively, but with the immovability of a mountain. He knew what was coming next. He braced his body, locking his knees slightly so he wouldn't be easily toppled. "You are making a career-ending mistake, son," Marcus said softly. "Don't call me son," Braden spat. And then he lunged. The physical contact was sudden and unnecessary. Braden grabbed Marcus's left wrist and wrenched it behind his back with enough force to tear a rotator cuff in a man less fit than Marcus. Marcus didn't grunt. He didn't pull away. He allowed the arm to be manipulated, leaning his torso forward to alleviate the pressure on his shoulder joint. "Stop resisting. Stop fighting me," Braden yelled for the benefit of the witnesses, despite the fact that Marcus was perfectly limp. "I am not resisting." Marcus repeated, his voice tight with pain but controlled. "I am complying with your physical force." Braden kicked Marcus's legs apart, forcing him to spread his stance. He jammed his knee into the back of Marcus's thigh. "Give me your other hand." Marcus slowly brought his right hand behind his back. He wasn't going to give Braden an excuse to use the taser or the baton. He felt the cold steel of the handcuffs bite into his wrists. Braden ratcheted them tight, too tight. "You're under arrest for trespassing, obstruction of justice, and disorderly conduct." Braden panted the exertion mostly from his own adrenaline rather than any struggle. "Disorderly conduct?" Marcus asked, his cheek pressed against the rough stucco of the pool house wall where Braden had pushed him. "I haven't raised my voice once. You are the only one creating a disturbance, officer." "Shut up." Braden hauled Marcus upright and spun him around. "You have the right to remain silent. Use it." "I know my rights," Marcus said, looking Braden dead in the eye. "Better than you do. Do you have a body camera, officer?" "Yeah, it's on, and it's recording you acting like a fool." Braden smirked. "Good," Marcus nodded. "Ensure you upload that footage immediately. It will be Plaintiff's Exhibit A." Braden shoved Marcus forward, marching him toward the gate. The residents on the balconies were shouting now. "Hey, that's the new landlord." "Mrs." Gable yelled from the third floor. "Officer, he owns the building." Braden paused for a fraction of a second. The words filtered through his rage. Landlord owns the building. But his brain rejected the information. It didn't fit his narrative. The guy was in dirty work clothes. He was sweating. He was black. Landlords wore suits. Landlords were somewhere else. This lady was confused. "Back inside, ma'am," Braden yelled back. "Do not interfere or you're next." "You are ignoring exculpatory evidence," Marcus said as they walked. "Witnesses are identifying me as the property owner. You have a duty to investigate that claim before removing me." "I don't have a duty to listen to screaming neighbors." Braden grunted, pushing Marcus toward the cruiser. "We'll sort it out at the station. If you really own the place, you should have just showed me your ID." "I shouldn't have to show you my papers to stand on my own land," Marcus said. "That is the point you are missing. My dignity is not a privilege you grant me. It is a right I possess." Braden opened the back door of the cruiser. The heat from the interior rolled out. It was stifling. He shoved Marcus inside. Marcus had to bend awkwardly to get his tall frame into the cramped plastic seat. The door slammed shut, cutting off the fresh air. Through the wire mesh, Marcus watched Officer Braden walk around to the driver's side. Braden looked rattled. He was wiping sweat from his forehead. He took a long look at the apartment complex, at the people filming him. He knew deep down that something felt wrong, but he had the handcuffs on now. There was no going back. The only way out was through. He had to book this guy. He had to make the charges stick. Marcus leaned his head back against the seat. His shoulders throbbed. The handcuffs were cutting off circulation to his thumbs. But a cold, tactical calm settled over him. He closed his eyes for a moment. He wasn't a prisoner. He was a combatant in a new kind of war, and he had just drawn the enemy into a kill box. The interior of the patrol car smelled of industrial cleaner and stale anxiety. The air conditioning blasted, but it did little to cool the tension. Marcus sat in the back, his posture as upright as the molded plastic seat allowed. He stared at the back of Officer Braden's head. Braden was driving fast, too fast for a residential zone. He was gripping the steering wheel so hard his knuckles were white. The silence in the car was heavy. Usually arrestees pleaded. They begged. They asked what was going to happen. They cried. Or they cursed and kicked the windows. Marcus did none of that. He sat in absolute silence. The silence was a weapon. In the Marines, Marcus had learned that silence makes undisciplined men nervous. It makes them fill the void. Braden cleared his throat. He picked up the radio microphone. "Dispatch Unit 4 Alpha. En route to precinct with one male. Subject was belligerent. Hostile crowd forming. decided to extract for officer safety. Marcus listened. Lies he noted mentally. Belligerent, hostile crowd. The crowd was two old ladies and a guy in pajamas. Braden was building a narrative. He was trying to cover his tracks on the recorded line. Braden glanced in the rearview mirror, meeting Marcus's eyes. Marcus held the gaze. He didn't blink. "You brought this on yourself," Braden said, talking to the mirror. "All you had to do was show a driver's license. Takes 5 seconds. But you had to be a tough guy." Marcus said nothing. "Now your car is going to get towed." Braden continued, his voice rising slightly. "You're going to have an arrest record. Depending on what the judge says, you might spend the night in holding. Was it worth it? Was it worth the hassle just to prove a point?" Marcus remained silent. He watched the city streets pass by. He saw the familiar landmarks of the town he had lived in for 40 years. He had fought for this country. He had lost friends in deserts on the other side of the world for the ideals of freedom and liberty. And here he was, handcuffed in the back of a car by a boy who treated the Constitution like a suggestion. "You deaf," Braden snapped. "I'm talking to you." "I am exercising my right to remain silent," Marcus said. "As you instructed me to do." Braden slammed his hand on the steering wheel. "Fine, be that way." Braden turned up the volume on the police scanner, trying to drown out the oppressive quiet, but the silence from the back seat felt louder than the radio chatter. Braden started second-guessing himself. What if he does own the place? No, that's impossible. Look at his truck. Look at his clothes. But that lady, she said he was the landlord. Braden shook his head. Doesn't matter, he told himself. He refused a lawful order. He resisted. Even if he owns it, he broke the law by not identifying during an investigation. Braden clung to that logic like a life raft. He had to believe it. Back at Oakwood Gardens, the video footage was already moving. Mr. Henderson had uploaded the clip to the Neighborhood Next Door page in Facebook. The caption read, "Cop arrests our new landlord, Marcus Thorne, for fixing the pool. Unbelievable." By the time Braden's cruiser turned into the precinct parking lot, the video had 200 shares. Local comments were pouring in. People recognized Marcus. "Wait, isn't that Colonel Thorne? I served with him. He's on the library board." The digital storm was gathering, but inside the cruiser, Braden was still confident he was in control. He pulled into the sally port, the heavy garage door rumbling shut behind them. "End of the line," Braden said, putting the car in park. "Let's go, and don't try anything stupid." Marcus stepped out of the car when the door opened. His legs were stiff. "The only stupid thing that has occurred today, officer, is already on your body camera." Braden shoved him toward the booking intake door. "Keep walking." The booking area was a sterile room of gray cinder blocks and fluorescent lights. It smelled of bleach and unwashed bodies. Braden marched Marcus up to the high counter where the desk sergeant sat. Sergeant Frank Miller was 55 years old, a thick-set man with a mustache that had seen better days and eyes that had seen too much. He was reading a file, a half-eaten bagel sitting on a napkin next to his keyboard. He looked up as the door buzzed. "What you got, Braden?" Miller asked, his voice gravelly. "Trespassing, resisting, obstruction." Braden rattled off, guiding Marcus to the metal bench. "Guy wouldn't ID, caused a scene at the Oakwood Apartments." Miller looked at the suspect. He squinted, then his eyes went wide. He stood up slowly, the file sliding off his lap onto the floor. "Colonel Thorne?" Miller asked. Marcus looked at the sergeant. A flicker of recognition crossed his face. "Sergeant Miller, 1st Battalion, 7th Marines, 29 Palms, 1998. "Yes, sir," Miller said. He looked at the handcuffs on Marcus's wrists. He looked at Officer Braden, then he looked back at the handcuffs. "Braden, uncuff him. Now." "What?" Braden blinked. "Sarge, he's a suspect. He was trespassing and—" "I said uncuff him." Miller barked, his voice echoing off the concrete walls. Do you know who this is? He's a trespasser, Braden insisted, though his voice wavered. He wouldn't identify. Miller came around the desk. He moved with surprising speed for a big man. He pushed Braden aside and unlocked the handcuffs himself. Sir, I apologize. Are you injured? Shoulder's a bit stiff, Sergeant, Marcus said, rubbing his wrists. But I'll live. Sarge, what are you doing? Braden protested. You can't just release him. I have charges. You have a headache, Braden. That's what you have, Miller growled. He turned to Marcus. Sir, I need to process your personal effects just for the log, even if we're kicking this loose. Do you have ID? In my back pocket, Marcus said. And in the canvas satchel the officer took from my truck. Braden had thrown Marcus's work bag on the counter. Miller opened it. He pulled out a leather wallet. He opened it and laid the driver's license on the counter. Marcus Aurelius Thorne. Address 124 Oakwood Drive. The address matches the location of arrest, Miller said, glaring at Braden. He didn't show me that, Braden stammered. He refused. Miller reached back into the bag. He pulled out a thick stack of papers clipped together. It was a property deed. The blue stamp from the county recorder's office was dated yesterday. Miller held up the deed. Braden, can you read? Yes, Sarge. Read this line, grantee. Braden leaned in. Braden. His stomach dropped through the floor. Grantee Marcus A. Thorne, LLC. He bought the building, Braden, Miller said, his voice dangerously low. You arrested the owner of the property for trespassing on his own property. The room went silent. The other officers in the booking area stopped what they were doing. They looked at Braden. It was the look you give a man who has just walked off a cliff. I didn't know, Braden whispered. He looked like he was wearing work clothes. He wouldn't answer me. He doesn't have to answer you. Miller slammed the deed onto the counter. The sound was like a gunshot. That is the law. Unless you have RAS, he doesn't have to say a damn word. And being black at a pool is not RAS. I need to speak to the watch commander, Marcus said quietly. And I want a copy of the incident report, the booking sheet, and the body camera footage preserved immediately. I'll get the lieutenant, Miller said. Braden, go sit in this break room. Don't speak to anyone. Don't write anything. Just sit there and pray you still have a job tomorrow. Braden looked at Marcus. For the first time, the arrogance was gone. In its place was pure, unadulterated fear. He realized that the old man hadn't been resisting. He had been waiting. 10 minutes later, the atmosphere in the precinct had shifted from routine to crisis mode. Lieutenant Henderson and the precinct captain, Captain Reynolds, were in the room. Captain Reynolds was a pragmatic man who hated lawsuits, and he could smell a 7-figure settlement wafting off this situation. Marcus sat in a chair in the captain's office. He wasn't handcuffed, but he hadn't left. He refused to leave until everything was documented. Colonel Thorne, Captain Reynolds said, smoothing his tie. I want to personally apologize for this misunderstanding. Officer Braden is young. He made a judgment error. We are going to expunge the arrest record immediately. It'll be like it never happened. You're free to go with our deepest apologies. It was the standard play. Apologize, erase, make it go away. Marcus didn't move. Captain, with all due respect, it did happen, and we are not going to pretend it didn't. Sir, we can handle this administratively, Reynolds pressed. We'll discipline the officer. I am sure you will, Marcus said, but that doesn't address the violation of my Fourth Amendment rights, or the assault, or the kidnapping. Kidnapping. Come on, Colonel, that's a stretch. Reynolds forced a laugh. He took me against my will without probable cause. That is the definition of kidnapping, Captain. The badge does not grant immunity from the basic definitions of criminal acts. Marcus reached into his satchel and pulled out a notepad. I want the preservation order for the footage signed by you right now. I want the names of every officer who was on scene, and I want Officer Braden's disciplinary history. I can't give you personnel files, Reynolds said, his tone hardening. My lawyer will get them in discovery then. Marcus stood up. I am filing a federal civil rights lawsuit under Section 1983. Unlawful search and seizure, excessive force, false arrest. And I am suing the city, the department, and Officer Braden personally. The captain's face paled. Colonel, let's be reasonable. We are both men of service here. I served the Constitution, Captain, Marcus said, his voice ice cold. Your officer served his ego. Do not conflate the two. At that moment, the captain's desk phone rang. He ignored it. It rang again. He picked it up angrily. What? He listened for a moment, then looked at Marcus. It's the mayor. The video had gone viral. Not just local viral, national. A civil rights activist with 2 million followers had retweeted Mr. Henderson's footage. The headline was Trending Hero Veteran Arrested for Cleaning His Own Pool. I think you should take that, Marcus said. I'll show myself out. I have a pool to finish cleaning. Marcus walked out of the office. He walked past the booking desk where Sergeant Miller gave him a sharp, respectful nod. He walked past the break room where he saw Kyle Braden sitting with his head in his hands. Marcus walked out the front doors of the station into the bright midday sun. He took a deep breath. He didn't feel happy. He didn't feel triumphant. He felt tired. But he knew the mission wasn't over. The mission had just changed. The fallout was swift and brutal, exactly as Marcus had predicted. Officer Kyle Braden was placed on unpaid leave that afternoon. The internal affairs investigation took only 3 weeks. The body camera footage was damning. It showed Braden ignoring the law, escalating a non-threat, and fabricating charges. But what sealed his fate was the audio from the car ride, his admissions that he was arresting Marcus for attitude rather than a crime. Braden was terminated for cause. He tried to fight it through the union, but the Fraternal Order of Police looked at the viral video and quietly declined to fund his defense. They knew a loser when they saw one. The lawsuit took a year. The city settled before trial. They knew a jury would destroy them. The settlement was for $1.2 million. But the money wasn't the point for Marcus. 6 months after the arrest, Oakwood Gardens was transformed. The vagrant landlord had gone to work. The money from the lawsuit didn't go into Marcus's retirement fund. It went into the complex. It was Memorial Day weekend. The sun was shining. The smell of barbecue smoke hung in the air. The community pool was sparkling. The water was crystal clear. New lounge chairs lined the deck. A brand new splash pad for the kids sprayed water in colorful arcs. And right by the gate where Officer Braden had tried to bully a man he deemed lesser, there was a new sign. It didn't list rules. It didn't say, no trespassing. It read, The Colonel's Pool, open to all residents. Respect the water. Respect each other. Marcus stood by the pump house watching the families. He saw Mrs. Gable reading a book under a new umbrella. He saw kids splashing. He saw Mr. Henderson grilling hot dogs. Looks good, Colonel, a voice said. Marcus turned. It was Frank Miller, the desk sergeant. He was in civilian clothes. It's getting there, Frank, Marcus said. You know, Braden left town, Miller said, watching the water. Moved to Idaho. Can't get a job in security. Consequences, Marcus said simply. You could have kept that money, you know. Miller gestured to the lavish renovations. Bought a boat. I have a boat, Marcus smiled. I needed a community. You can't build a community if people are afraid to come outside. I wanted them to know that this is their home, truly theirs. Marcus looked at the diverse group of people swimming in his pool. Black, white, Hispanic, Asian families just trying to live their lives. Ownership isn't just about a deed, Frank, Marcus said quietly. It's about responsibility. Braden thought the badge made him an owner of the street. He forgot he was a servant. I never forgot. This story ends here, but the reality continues. Marcus Thorne had the rank, the knowledge, and the resources to fight back. But ask yourself what happens to the young man who doesn't have a colonel's pension. What happens to the person who gets scared and pleads guilty just to go home? We tell these stories not to divide, but to remind. To remind those with power that they are being watched, and to remind you that your rights are like muscles. If you don't exercise them, you lose them. I want to hear from you. Do you think the settlement was enough? Or should Officer Braden have faced criminal charges for kidnapping? Let me know in the comments below. Stay safe, stay educated, and never let anyone steal your dignity. I'll see you in the next video.